we've got a really cool group going on, and I'm so very thankful to be here. My name is Ariana Joy Jaime Saludares, and why I say my whole name is because I didn't like my name when I was little. I wanted to be something different. I wanted to be Brittany, Bethany, anything else other than Ariana. And my mother named me Ariana because as she was about to have me, she was reading a book, and Ariana was a character in the book. And my middle name, Joy, she said that of the three girls that she had, that I came out smiling. And she knew that I was going to be a joyous and joyful child. Now, you might have to ask her whether or not that is true, but I'll tell you one thing. I wasn't the one who snuck out at night. That was the other one. I wasn't the one that got arrested often. That was the other one. I also didn't give her much trouble, and I followed the rules. So both of my parents are educators, and I did a little bit of this in my introduction. My mother recently ended up retiring as an art teacher and loves to build doll houses for people. It makes her happy. My father was a sports fanatic, and he was a history teacher. And I've always been active in the community, through Girl Scouts, the youth programs, environmental clubs, just giving back. And what I'm going to talk about today is what I've titled Changing the Script, One Heart at a Time. And I have been talking about one heart at a time, one life at a time, one person at a time. I remember the first time that I referenced that, and my mother, I was 12, actually I was 11, and she was a principal. And she was having a very tough time because I am mixed. I am half Anglo, half Mexican, and she has a beautiful Mexican accent because of where she grew up in southern New Mexico. Beautiful Mexican accent, and she's light-skinned. So they thought that she was Spaniard. And in this town that she was a principal in, she looked Spaniard and she spoke the dialect, and so they hired her. Now you would think that there's nothing wrong with any of that, but what ended up happening was that she started to see that a lot of this town, things weren't fair. Things weren't fair on religious fronts, racial fronts, everything, every single tick mark of discrimination you could imagine, it was there. And she started to say, you know, let's start here. Let's start with the children. And they didn't really like that, because then they found out that she was actually white and that her Spanish was learned. And she ended up having such a horrible time. And I would tell her, just find one person every single day to make a difference in, to give hope, to share hope. Just find one, and that is all you need to do. This isn't a new concept. I know that you've heard it. It's about being, baby steps, but also changing a direction that something is not going, to be able to continue to stay involved. They talk about moments in your life that you could remember that are kind of huge pivotal moments. And I wanna share three with you. And one of them was when I was 15, and I was working with one of my mentors, and I was telling her how I wanted to be a dentist because I would be able to take care of my family's teeth for free. Because my parents were educators, which meant that they made peanuts, which meant that we were poor and we didn't get to go to all of the places or do all of the things. And Anne is her name. And she said to me when I told her that I wanted to be a dentist, she goes, you were meant to serve. You're supposed to be in the social field. You're not supposed to be in dentistry. Money doesn't drive you. And I was a little offended. I was offended because she didn't know me. She didn't know anything about what I wanted to be. And I needed to become a dentist to take care of my parents' teeth and to take care of my community and to take care of all of my family, because we didn't have the resources to be able to do that. So I decided after high school I didn't have money for college. So I went ahead and just, I did a couple of different fun jobs, but I found a position in luxury real estate. And it was amazing money. And it was empty. I was, of course, great at my job, but it was really hard because I kept on feeling sorry for everybody that couldn't afford it. And I didn't understand. And I couldn't go along with a lot of the things that the owners or the asset management was saying. They would say, well, so-and-so can't afford their rent. We'll go ahead and evict them. We'll go ahead and evict them. Well, can't we work with them? Well, no, it's black or white. That is what it is. It's black or white. They can pay or they can't pay. That's it. So that was how it led in from being 15 and told that I am meant to serve. After that, I realized that, it wasn't for me. And I kind of floated. There was a time that I was in Denver as an adult, and I had just gotten a tattoo on my rear. And I called my mother, and she said, well, what are you doing? I'm like, well, I'm walking around the streets of Denver. And she says, when I told you that you could do anything in the world if you put your mind to it, I didn't mean nothing. Nothing wasn't an option. And I said, well, you should have said that nothing wasn't an option, because you said I could do anything that I wanted. And I remind her that every single time I can. I recall it because my sisters, we're not all on the same path, but we are all floating together to where one of my sisters has her own bathing suit company. My other sister takes care of a bulldog full time. And then I am working in nonprofits. And so it's really interesting because we float along in this space and we have the most amazing relationship. And we all care for so many different things, but I really do think as educators, my parents really did think that they were going to have 3 doctors in the house, and not any of us would be bathing suit company entrepreneurs or bulldog handlers or anything like that. But I know that I don't disappoint my mother. I know I don't. Now, the third moment in my life that was pivotal was when I was doing some I was looking deep into myself, which we all have done, and I had begun to hear that we are all connected. Yes, I understand. My grandmother tells everybody who listens that we are all brothers and sisters. She says that to every single person. If you come down to see me one day and she's still kicking, you'll hear her say, we're all brothers and sisters, so we're all related. She'll tell you. But what it meant also was us being connected. It was not only are we connected to our kin, to a stranger, but we're also connected to our enemies. You'll continue to see the same patterns over and over and over again, the same problems, if you don't address the issue. And they also talk about what is an enemy, what is hate. That is a different subject, but where I want to go with this is talking about nonviolence. There are some things that we are, like right now, I'll be honest, with some of the news that has been coming out with some of the immigration policy, my heart is hurting. Every day I wake up and I think about some of the women and the children that are still in detention, and my heart physically, it hurts and it chokes me. But again, I have to continue. I am connected to my enemy and those that I disagree with. And until I understand the connection between us, then it never goes away. Now, where that comes in, as far as knowing thy enemy, is I play roller derby. I've played roller derby for 12 years, and it is a contact sport, and it looks brutal, right? And that's the funny thing is, so here I am, I really truly am a passive person who doesn't like germs, and here I am playing roller derby with 20 or 30 other people, swapping germs, being violent, and it was really hard, because the moment that I started to think about knowing thy enemy or knowing thy opponent, everything began to change. Is the way that I played and the way that I thought. Everything translated. I took a break from roller derby because of COVID, not because of the nonviolence, but there is a way to do everything. People would say to me, well, I don't like getting hit. Hitting hurts. And I said, well, then don't get hit. I mean, that seems, like, well, I don't want to fall. Well, then don't fall. Well, I don't want to touch anybody. Well, then don't touch anybody. And so it was kind of fun. Now, I ended up living in Italy for 3 years. And again, back to the introduction where I was talking about my grandma. I could feel her getting older. I could feel her needing me, and I had to come home. And my husband, who is so very type A, I love him to death because he centers me. He has to have a plan with an Excel spreadsheet, a paragraph of every single description, and a schedule daily. And here I am floating along in the world, messing up all of his plans. And I told him, I said, I need to go home and I need to be with her. And he said, well, Deming, okay, Deming, New Mexico. You know that New Mexico is the last in this and the last in that, and education and this and social programs and funding, and the list went on. And I just said, yes, I know. And he goes, and you know that we're in Italy, the land of 40-cent liters of wine and pizza and gelato and beautiful beaches and carefree and history. And I said, I know. And he said, well, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get a job. And I said, please do. That would be nice, because I don't know if I could afford our lifestyle and what I do. And he said, well, I got a job. And I said, okay, what is it? And he says, it's Border Patrol. And I said, okay, we could do that. You could be the one that changes people one heart at a time. You could be it. And he said to me, I don't think I can do it. And I said, okay, all right, we'll wait for another thing to come around. Job number 2, and it was Border Patrol. Job number 3, Border Patrol. Job number 4, Border Patrol. Every single time that he applied for something, it came back as Border Patrol. So we decided to live apart for a year. He being in Albuquerque, me being in Deming, with a brand new baby, a little boy, a grandmother who was, had rockets on her feet, in a new town. because that is what we could do to survive. That is what I could do to be next to my grandmother. So I leaned on my family a lot, and I talked to my grandmother all of the time, and I realized she did need me. She began to have dementia. Well, it was already there, but I realized now how much more it was affecting everything. This woman who I modeled my life after, she was 5 feet when I knew her. Now she's 4'10" because, you shrink when you get older. So she was everything to me. She was the one who got me interested in science. She was so well read. She'd read and still reads every single book on the planet. She's amazing. She can still carry a conversation, but there was just a glisten in her eye, and I knew she wasn't the same. And I knew that I was there at the right moment. I talked to my father. By the way, so that you have some perspective of the age, I was 37. And I talked to my dad, and again, my parents are polar opposites, like my husband and I. My father was so completely sports minded, and everything is Joe Coach, and everything is translated in the trajectory of how far a ball flies and what it means for team sports. And that's what I got from my father. And my mother was everything was, we don't own guns. Guns are not necessary, nonviolence. And butterflies and rainbows. And boy, do I like butterflies and rainbows. But I was sitting at breakfast with my father, and he said, "You are now in your prime. You have just hit your prime. Your body may be older, but your mind is where it needs to be, to where you are the perfect age to begin what you want to begin." I wasn't but 42 before I started to mature. Now, I know that men and women mature at different ages. If you asked my mother, she would say my father never matured, even after the age of 40. But I had never heard my father say that before. Now, of course, he tells me that he loves me, but there is a bigger and a deeper meaning to what he meant. He meant to me that anything is still possible, regardless of how old I am physically, but my soul is a different age. So we came to Deming, and I tell you, I've got 2 minutes left of this before we really started, and you need to understand the background of what this means. We came to Deming, and I told my husband, this will be a good place to raise our children. It will be. If it isn't, it will be. We will have everything. We will have programs. There are things. If it's not there, I'll make it. That is a huge order to promise to someone, because if I think about it, that was probably the wrong thing, because now I'm on the hook for this. But I knew that he would support me, especially since he was the one that was working. Again, when it came to it, I was taking care of my grandmother, who again was dying every day. Her memories were fading, and the same 5 stories came about. And that was something that was so peculiar. Dealing with a death of a person that's still alive. We are all connected, and the same things will continue to repeat themselves every single day. So we started a park at our property, and we started a library because my grandmother loves books. We built it. We put a little free library out. I know that you've seen it. This isn't a new concept, but this was something completely new to our town, who has such a high level of either both parents or whomever is guardians of children working 1, 2 jobs, 3 jobs, and our library is only open until 5 p.m. And so I, I was out there one day, and it was like 7 p.m. And a woman came by and she said, you know, if it wasn't for your library, I wouldn't be able to get books for my kid, my grandchild, because I work so late and the library closes and the school requires them to read a new book every single week, and I don't have the money to get new books. So thank you very much for having this library. And then art happened. I love art. I did some strange things in our community park that we had for our property. I put huge park benches that we found in Tucson, Arizona, and they're made of huge cats with, I mean, animal benches, rams, horses that the children could sit on that were actually also practical for the parents as they sat there with their children and picked the flowers or something else. One day, it was Mother's Day, and I got a call, and they said, we have a huge situation. We know that you collect things for the community, and do you have any shoes? We need shoes right now. And I said, wait, what's going on? I mean, tell me what happened. And they said, well, Border Patrol dropped off 35 people in the middle of the night at 10 p.m. at the bus station. And they have nowhere to go and they have no food. And so I don't really know what to do right now. And please, you have extra shoes, don't you? Can you please bring them? And I said, okay, I've got some shoes. Let me figure this out. Within an hour's time, that 35 people had ballooned into 150. Border Patrol had dropped off 150 people in this little tiny town in southern New Mexico. And the only reason why they dropped them off was because we had a bus station at the McDonald's. At the McDonald's, they dropped off people. Then we had another bus station in town at a gas station, and they dropped them off there too. So here we had 150 people. By night's end on the first day, we had 300 people. Traumatized, unable to speak English, most of them, from so many different countries, hungry, dirty, unclothed, confused, in shock, and it was utter chaos. And I told my husband, he said, well, it being Mother's Day, what do you want to do? And I said, well, let's throw what we've got in the back of the truck and let's go. So we loaded up whatever we had. I told my son to go through his room and to pick up any of the toys that he could find. And the baby was in the car seat being a baby. And, you know, and it was heartbreaking. Their eyes were sunken and they were exhausted and they sat there fumbling through things, trying to make sense of what to do next. They had no idea where they were. They had no clue that where they were in was a town 30 miles from the border. Now, the current administration had said 3 to 7 months in the past, well, we are going to go ahead and start dropping them off in the towns. These people, these illegals, they weren't illegal. All they wanted was freedom. They wanted to join us in the United States and to be here, to be safe, to have an opportunity for their children to grow. That is what they wanted. And instead they got Deming, New Mexico. Over 10,000 of them got dropped off. 10,000. 10,000 in 3.5 months. Some days we got 50. Some days we got 300. Some days we got 100. The smell of bodies was insane. The smell of poverty, of torture, of trauma. And I told my husband that this was where I needed to be. It was really interesting because a whole bunch of people stepped in, and it was great. If you've ever seen, it was like ants at a picnic. You know, everybody came to help, and it was beautiful. That was the most amazing sense of community I had ever felt before. Because sometimes the world can be cruel, and sometimes all you hear are the bad things. But in reality, it's sometimes just those that have the loudest voices are able to say what's going on, not the workers. The workers are busy. They're busy doing things. Those that have the time to naysay are the ones that are constantly making the noise. So we worked, and we worked hard. And I found my place, and I was just doing intake with volunteers, helping. I love doing art. And the first thing that I realized that place needed was an art gallery. So I told my mom, who just so happened to fly down in town because she knew how crazy this was. Mom, we need paintbrushes, we need paint, we need a clothesline and clothespins. String them up across the walls and let's do this. Make it different. They set up in a World War II airplane shelter. And it was cold, the nights were cold. And we fed them pizza, and they got sick, and they were already sick. And it was 56 degrees in the nighttime, and they were freezing. Because of course they all came from Central and South America, where it's much warmer, and they don't have pizza. They hear of pizza. They think of pizza, but truly, I mean, I'm not going to mention names, but if I have to go to for a pizza place, I'm not going to dial it for delivery. But that is what they felt. That is what some Americans were like, well, welcome to America. Here you go. Let's give you some McDonald's. It was horrible. They got sick. So what we did was we rearranged what their feeding times and how we fed them and what we fed them. And then they began to be able to heal. There was children everywhere because in Deming, we only had familial units, which meant that, you know, you had to at least have somebody underage. And there were times that the parents showed up without their child. I don't have to tell you where they went, the children. And I don't have to tell you how many months it was before they tried to find their child again. But there was very few cases nonetheless. And the art was amazing. One of the things about self-discovery and using art through therapy is sometimes if you just allow yourself to doodle, then you get more out of trying to color within the lines. And a lot of people brought coloring books, which were great. But if you're trying to allow someone to feel what they need to feel, to heal how they need to heal, you don't give them a coloring book. All you give them is a piece of paper and something to use. Maybe it's a paintbrush, maybe it's a crayon, maybe it's a marker, maybe it's glue with random pieces. The walls started to fill up everywhere. Everywhere was art, and it was beautiful. The children didn't have time because they were whisked away within 72 hours to their new home. They didn't have time to take their art, so we kept it. And we kept it, and I still have it. And then at the end, when we got no more people, which was a year ago, because of other administrative changes, I had an entire binder, bags of art. And that was all that I had left to remind me that this even happened. I have just memories and their art. And I felt the one thing that Why did they leave their art behind? Well, of course, they couldn't fit in the bag. You know why? Because this is what they came with. A bag, one bag that we gave them. And inside their bag, a lot of the times, we gave them a water bottle, a towel, and toiletries. And that was their worldly possessions. This was it. This is all they had. Sometimes we gave them blankets. We had people from the Latter-day Saints donate blankets that they handmade. These are beautiful. And we were able to give them out. And then we were able to give the children dolls. Every child. We offered a doll. We had different genders, but most of the things that we had were, we called brown babies. The children who came to us, they weren't light-skinned, they were dark-skinned. So we found babies that looked like them to give them. And one of the saddest things was seeing this was part of their therapy, because we only had sometimes 48 hours with these children and these parents, and the parents being children themselves, because we would have 20-year-olds with 2 children, and they were still babies themselves. They were so inundated with the journey that they made, be it a 5-day trip or 3 months walking through the Mexican desert. They would come to us and they would begin to rock. The children would rock, and we would give them babies. And so what they would do instead was they would just rock their babies. They were doing what they needed their parents to do, but their parents were unable to be able to give them that type of contact, because they were absolutely in shock with what had happened. So the children, being such resilient little ones, would have the babies. They would sleep with the babies, take them with them. And they would be so surprised when we would say, no, take your babies with you. The thing that probably killed me the worst, there was a time where I was breastfeeding at the time with my child. She was probably almost a year and a half. And there was nobody to stay at night. No one to stay at night. 300 immigrants and not one person to stay. So I would tell my husband, I've got a great idea. You can't breastfeed, but I can. So I'll take the baby with me and we'll stay in a cot. So we did. And we stayed there. And I watched to ensure that maybe the first sleep that these people would have gotten, the first safe sleep in months, that they were safe. And I would watch, and the people would wake up at night with night terrors, and the children would cry, and that broke me. I knew then that I could not just let this go anymore. That is probably when I decided I'm not going to stay in the middle anymore. I had been passive for peace. But what I had done was actually not helped where I could help. Because what I could do, I could do more. That transitions into the next part with it, which is answering the call. If you need to get water or drink something or eat or pet a dog at this moment, feel free. Allow yourself the liberty to do what you need to do. We'll continue on. We'll talk about some other things and then have some questions but I want to talk about answering the call. I have absolutely enjoyed so many sessions because there's a lot of things that have just concreted about who I am and who my family is and what role we play. But there are sometimes we get caught in a rut on a plateau and we don't know what to do next. And so I'm going to talk about answering the call. Where do you begin? How do you decide what matters most? But most of all, what are you looking to gain? Now, I'm fairly positive. I'm going to make an assumption, and it could be untrue, but it could be that there's at least one of you where you work in the community, you volunteer, you help. The assumption is probably that all of you do that in some respect or another. But what are you looking to get out of what you do? Because if it is money, you might look elsewhere. If it's money to give, you probably will do that because I tell my husband, thank you for working, so that way I could stay home and give his money away to others in our community, because that's what I do. What are you good at? What are you great at? What are you not as great at? What do you dislike? I'll tell you what I dislike. I hate cleaning. I hate cleaning. But I still have to do it. My husband hates it worse, but he also does the dishes. So because he does the dishes, then I'll go ahead and I'll clean. I don't consider doing the dishes and cleaning. I mean, it's not the same thing. That is something that I loathe, where he doesn't mind doing the dishes. So I'll iron, no problem. And what are your goals? When you come to a situation, what are your goals? It is so very important to write down and think about these as you research a new situation that you're going to get yourself into. Because what is the risk? These are all of the questions that I'm going to go ahead and write them down so that you have them. And I understand that I'm not speaking to anybody who's a newbie in this realm, but it is so great to hear it put down again, so that way we could remember to continue to check back with ourselves on what it means to do something. Let's say, what are you able to do? I heard in a different presentation that you don't have to move the moon, and that is exactly right. Maybe you aren't good at one thing, but maybe you're good at another. I had people coming to me and saying, I want to help, but I don't know how to help. And I said, well, what can you do? And she says, well, I can't be there. I'm poor. I don't like talking to people. I don't like touching people. I don't like being there, but there has to be something that I can do. I said, well, do you like writing letters? And she goes, I'll write letters. So I said, write thank you notes to everybody that has donated. And she says, I can do that. And that there is what she was able to contribute. You don't have to be a millionaire or rich to be able to contribute anything. Because again, what do you have as your resource? Some people are financially able to give. And that would be great. I don't know what that feels like, but I do know what it feels like to give in time. That is my resource. I come up with crazy ideas. I don't know if that's a positive or a negative, but I still give them anyway. I like to brainstorm. What are you not great at? What are you great at? What are you good at? What are the risks? Thinking about the risks and how it pertains to your goal is also important. You know, especially thinking about protesting. I took my husband to his first protest, which we won't discuss what happened or where it was because it's very important that we don't discuss what we're talking about. The first rule of Fight Club is we don't talk about Fight Club. The first rule of some type of protesting is we don't talk about what protest we did at the protest. So But the point is, you think about the risks that you can make. It was funny because we left the children at home. He was excited, and I said, no, this is it. This is what we need to do. And we went. But he's a 15-year veteran of the United States military. And it was ingrained in him so much of all of what he was now speaking against. We call that evolution. You are always able to change your past when new information is given to you. Today, if you learn something new, tomorrow, you can say, I changed my mind. Don't ever feel like you can't do that. And if someone said, May 1st of 1963, you said that you didn't like this. And you can say, I evolved. Join me. Try it sometime. Now, you also have to identify your limits when you do something new. What are you willing to do? One of the things that I really liked, as one of the presenters said, was non-negotiables. That is so very important. I know that I cannot bring more than 5, yes, there will be time for discussion, asylees home with me at a time because I don't have more beds. However, I know that I can probably find something else. Now, that is saying that that is a fictitious limit, because truly I have 75 square feet per person, and the HUD rule for occupancy in a home is 75 square feet per person. So if we put a tent over it, think about all of the people that we could help. But really, truly, what are your non-negotiables? I will never endanger my children. That is a pretty strict non-negotiable. I will never go anywhere that I don't have communication with someone else. For example, I will never go into the desert looking for someone, even if their life is in peril, because I don't have communication and I can't get extracted. That might not be your limit, but that is my own. Now, you also have to decide what can you use that's in your toolbox? What privileges do you have, and what platforms do you have that you can use to further your efforts and your advocacy? I am not white enough, and I am not brown enough. And that's a really funny thing to say, but I do not have the privilege of being white and walking into Mexico border town and walking around without trouble. And I don't know how to convey that when I would have people come to me and say, well, I can walk down right now into Palomas, and I go there all the time, and I don't have any problem, and nobody bothers me. So what's the big problem? Why are you scared? And I said, well, I invite you to look at yourself. You are Anglo. You are middle-aged. You look like you have money. And of course you can walk in there. They're not going to bother you because you are their bread and butter. You go to their stores and frequent and purchase their items. They depend on you to do that. And so yes, you can do that, but not everybody can. That is a privilege that you have. Now, as far as your platform, many of us belong to different organizations that we are able to use. I kind of tease that all of the people that I have, all of my family, I've already tapped out everything that they can do, and I've squeezed out every dime to be able to have them donate to my cause that I'm working on. But I still ask, because those are the platforms that I have that I could tap in. One of the things that I want to talk about quickly is reactive and proactive activism. I set my goal today from now into the end of 2021. And I'm saying it, and this is going to be posted on the internet, so the world knows this is a goal. Proactive and reactive activism. I participate in reactive activism. People need help. I feed them. There's an abundance of pets in the area. I collect the pets and give them shelter. Someone needs shoes, we get them shoes. I mean, it's not ever really solving the issue. I had a community organizer come to me and he said, let me get your opinion on this. You're at a river and you see a baby floating down the river. What do? And I said, you jump in and you save the baby. And he goes, exactly. Okay, 2 minutes later, another baby goes down the river. Then what do? And I said, you save that baby too. And he said, and another. And I said, and you save it, and another, and you save that one too. And he says, where does it end? When are you going to stop and you're going to ask yourself, why are there babies in the river? What are you going to do? And I said, so what you're telling me is that you're wanting me to stop saving the babies and just let them go by? And he says, does it mean that you're going to be able to go upstream and stop the babies from getting tossed in the river? He said that to me about 8 months ago, and I finally came up with my answer. Last night as I was in bed, getting mad because he was trying to tell me that I'm not allowed to save the babies as they were floating down the river because I'm supposed to let them go and march up the river to stop the babies from getting thrown in, that's when I decided I now have the answer. I'm going to save every single baby that comes to me at that time and also march up the river to try and figure out how to stop that from happening. And that is okay to do both if you can do both. If you could only do one, then you can do one. If you can do both, you do both. If you want to be proactive and do proactive activism, that is wonderful. If you want to be reactive, I like reactive. I'm great at reactive. Does it change everything in the scope? No. But I know that at least one person and one heart has been changed. And sometimes when you're gathered with 5 million people in incarceration, or whatever the number is, and you have the opportunity to help one, is it better to worry about the 5 million, or is it better to concentrate on the one? So when you think about the activism that you do, and you're trying to quantify what you're going to get out of it, you're not going to get money, but maybe you can change a life. And even if one life has changed, even if one life has changed a day, a year, or every 10 years, one life has been changed. And there you are. There is your result. That is what you see. I have a couple of minutes for talking about facing opposition. You have to learn what your opposition is and what roadblocks you'll face. And this is just strategizing how you're going to move forward. You have to know the risks. Another thing that I do is I think about how can there be a yes behind every no? I'll tell you, I'm not persuasive, but sometimes maybe I'm how do I say this nicely about myself? When it comes to people, no isn't an option. When it comes to feeding children, not getting food to them is not an option. So I think about how my opposition would say no and why they would say no. And then I pose it to them and say, in what conditions would you say yes? And the moment that you have them thinking about why they would say yes, you've already changed their stance of an absolute. They're no longer absolutely no. They have now changed their yes into a condition. And then you can walk back. I'm not proud to say that that is a sales technique that I learned when I was in luxury communities, but it is. It is a sales technique. You know, when you're shopping for a house or a car that is $1,000 more than your budget point. But in what condition? Is it money that is your issue? Is it because you don't have the extra 1,000? Is it that you don't want the extra room? Now, there's nothing, one of the things that I don't do when I come to opposition is I don't make them feel bad or guilty for the way that they believe, because maybe we're saying the same things, but our paths just aren't meeting. And so trying to figure out the opposition and why they're thinking, sometimes it means that we are able to reconnect with exactly what they're looking at. Now, I want for you to think about how you can measure your success. You have to make sure that you make clear goals. And I'll tell you the trick on this one. And you also have to make realistic expectations for their outcomes. And here's the trick. I set my bar really low. Because you know what? I know that I could affect one life. I know that I can make one person. I know that I can feed one person. I know that I can. And that is my goal. And I am 100% successful every single time. Now, I know that that sounds funny, but I am annoyingly optimistic. Annoyingly, ask my husband. Sometimes he's like, the sky is falling. And I'm like, yes, but it's so beautiful. Look at this gorgeous sky that's falling down. But you do have to have realistic expectations, and you have to be okay with saying, I didn't get where I wanted to be, but I learned a lot. So I have the list of what type of questions you should ask when you're beginning to change something in your life. Now, changing the script is kind of like writing your own story. It is your story, what you want to add to it. It isn't changing the script of what everyone is doing, because you can't change someone else's story. You can only change what you do. So changing the script one heart at a time, even if that is your own, you are that one heart. And starting there, and then going forward. I ran a little longer than I wanted to, because I wanted to have a time for discussion. I thank every single one of you and your time. It's very precious. And I am so thankful that you allowed me to be here, to share my stories, to show my family. And yes, please come visit. I am also 100% successful at talking anybody in to looking at property here in Deming, New Mexico. I truly am. I will show you the amazing part of this town and the people and what is possible, and show you that it is possible within yourself too. So if you're looking to buy a new house, or you're not looking to buy a new house, come on down. I've got extra casitas, and you'll eat with my family and you'll argue with my grandmother. But I'll tell you what, if you say that women cannot do anything because they're a woman, you're gonna already be on her no list. Do you have any questions?
So I'm curious, Ariana, I don't really know much about, it seems like there's like, well, you were saying earlier when we were talking that there are sort of two things going on. So you have the facility in Deming, and then there is groups of people in Palomas. So for those of you who don't know, Palomas is immediately across the border on the Mexican side. And I think, Ariana, you said like 30 miles south of Deming. And so are those two, so where are all the people now? Are they mostly on the other side? And are the two facilities sort of working together, like in tandem? Like which, another thing I'm going to just tell everybody is that so for instance, in Silver City, where I live, which is 50 miles away from Deming, the other direction, the Unitarian Universalists, for instance, collect goods as well as, you know, cash donations and whatnot every Wednesday. And so there's a woman, Barbara, who sends out a notice to all of us and says, this week, this is what we need, you know, more of. And I went there once, you know, they were asking for bedding and stuff. So I, you know, they said, raid your closet. And I, you know, found some sheets and pillowcases and I took them over there. There were, this is a town of 10,000. There were 75 vehicles that came through the Unitarian Universalist parking lot that one day. They have this half-hour window that they set up. They bring your stuff at this time frame, and it was like unbelievable. And apparently that's normal. Yeah. So one of the things about what you and the others are doing, you know, it strikes me that you're not just, you know, working on the project you're working on, but you're also creating like infrastructure and networking connections and yeah, this like network of support that can also be applied to other stuff. So, okay, and now I'm just rambling. There's so much I could say, but I'll just shut up and let you answer my first question, which was, what about the two different, you know, this side of the border and that side of the border?
Yeah. Well, we are just one of many shelters along the border, just one, that have facilities and are waiting to house, to act if it happens again. Currently in Palomas, there is up to 100 people per day there waiting that are either accepted in the United States through one form or another, and then immediately deported across the border. And so I call it like a turn and burn, which means they come in, they go out, they come in, they go out. And it's solely because of the COVID response that our administration has put into place. Another one is they said, well, we don't want, if I say a generalized term, I want you to understand that it's generalized. I don't, so for example, the Mexicans are gonna come in and bring COVID. That's why we have to shut the southern borders. Well, there's a million things wrong with that statement, but regardless of what I think of the statement, that is what's being said. So they go. Not only are they Mexicans, but they're deporting anybody of any country, as well as those under the age of 18, right back over there into Palomas, Mexico. And again, simply because it's right there, they have no idea where they are. But we also don't get a lot of information because, again, those aren't the statistics the public is allowed to know. We don't get to know where they came from, where they were picked up from. All we know is they are there now. So a lot of what we want to do, even though we want to have proactive activism, we are having to react to what is happening. In Silver City, one of the things that we have gone ahead and start to say is, here are some of the things that you can do. You can continuously speak amongst your groups of those that you know that are looking to make a change. You can be that resource for funding for other groups that are currently accepting asylees in the United States, and it's like this many, but I still have that information. You can contact your congressman or woman. You can communicate to your to anybody that'll listen, and you can vote. That is what we can do now. That right there is the number one thing you can do to be proactive, is vote, and continue to tell anybody that'll listen to vote. We are in this situation because so many didn't vote. I don't care how you vote, but you need to understand that your vote is so very important. Now, I hope that I answered the questions that you asked, Laura. And yes, we have a whole bunch of stuff going on, and a whole bunch of opportunity. And there are so many parts of this that I didn't even get to say because of how we have begun to treat nonviolence and how we set up the shelter to be a trauma, to battle trauma through art. I mean, I didn't even get to tell you that part, but that is so very important as well, because I'll tell you one thing. The reason I knew that I had to step in was not just because of the night terrors from the children, but one day I think I was delivering crayons to one of the sites, and I heard 30 people talking about how they should organize the groups. And one younger person said, I've got an idea. What if we mark on them their number? That'll tell us what number they are when they come in. And I almost had a heart attack. But the point is that he had no idea what marking numbers and repeating histories, they had no idea. Do I blame him? Do I tell his administration? Do I step in myself? But I do know that one of the things that I said is, I have an idea. What if we did this instead? And that is what they did. Instead of marking people's numbers or identifying them or putting them in clothing that were meant for corrections facilities. It's the simple things that you can maybe suggest that make a huge amount of difference, that helps in the trauma and the healing of a person. And that right there is not necessarily so huge, but that is a monumental change that had it happened, I mean, the ramifications of what would it have been if every single person that was in a shelter situation in the United States all dressed the same and looked the same like criminals. We already have privatized corrections. I mean, you would look exactly like a criminal, and us who were outside would see them and say, they're wearing corrections uniforms. I think that they're prisoners or escapees instead of asylees and our new neighbors.
So I think I missed what you said that you did instead of doing the number or wearing the uniforms. What was your solution?
Well, we still had to randomize them and give them numbers, but the difference is that we allowed them to have liberty of their number. So they had it and they knew it, but we didn't write them on. It was removable. And so that way they could have it on them, but still it not be written on their arm. And so, yes, they ended up having to have one, but it also meant that we were able to give them the opportunity to choose where they put that number.
Okay,
In
thank
their
you.
pocket, on their person, etc.
Thank you so much, Ariana, for your presentation. It just seems to me that this is the most terrible moral disgrace in our nation these days. There are plenty of them, but for me, this one is the worst. And I appreciate the kind of positive message that I'm hearing from you in terms of response, and just want to second that. You know, there were 40 families that were dropped off in Little Flandreau, South Dakota, which is just 20 miles from where I live. And people responded because, once again, these people came with nothing. You know, they were just dropped off. And people responded in terms of their needs for their physical well-being. They've responded in terms of English as a second language classes in so many ways, and from all over the area, you know, not necessarily in that little town, because some of the people there weren't so happy about having, you know, more immigrants coming into the community, but from all around, people have responded. And I just think that's really what we are as a people. You know, it's not what's coming from on high. It's coming from the common people who are seeing a need and responding to it. So I appreciate that positive message.
You're welcome. I want to remind everybody that there is a dark side to all of this. There is the trauma. There is the nightmares, the night terrors, the abuse, and the stories that continue to hit because we are doing exactly what we thought would never happen. And some people, again, it is okay. I must remind you, it is okay. You don't have to be out there fighting the battles and being there on the protest lines. If you are unable, it is okay. There are other things that you can do to continue with the cause, with the activism. There are so many different parts of this, and you have to remember, there are so many more good people than there are negative. Unfortunately, we hear so much more negativity than what is positive. But all you have to do is ask. I am up at so many different times during the day and night. Let me know if you're having a negative thought, and I'll tell you a positive thing that happened that day. Annoyingly optimistic. I hope that never dies in me. I really do. Does anybody else want to share?
I really appreciate the work that you're doing, Ariana. I live in Santa Fe, and I'm so glad that there are people doing this difficult work down in Deming and along the border of our state. It's hard because, of course, our state borders the border, and we end up having a lot of the consequences from that, and some of the gifts like, I'm sure that many of your interactions with those people gave you gifts, and you are obviously also giving them gifts, and I don't mean things. Yeah, so I just thank you so much for doing that.
We were supported by so many others up north. I will say that even in our own town, it took less than 2 weeks to strip this town of all of its resources from its people. Less than 2 weeks. They were exhausted. They had fed everybody. Everybody had emptied their cabinets, their everything. I had viejitas coming with 40 wrapped burritos because that is what they could give. But everybody, the world, I received packages from Japan to pass on. And so there is so much more support. Sometimes you don't even have to ask. You just let the world and the universe know that it's needed, and it shows up. All of these networks, I'm glad that you said, Carl, about the networks, because that is part of the resource. Well, and Laura also said that it's a part of the resources that you have, your networks. Who do you know? And it's nothing about like, well, she only calls on me when she needs something. That isn't how humanity works. If you have that mindset that she's only going to call on me when she needs something, then you're going at it wrong. I am here to tell you that I am a resource for you. If I can't find something, I'm going to help you find it. If you want a cause to stand behind, I'll figure something out for you. Do you need help with, telling a car salesman? No, I can probably help you with that too. But the point is that humanity, we must continue to work together, and it is acceptable to use your network. That is who we are, and that is who I see all of these beautiful faces. We are each other's network. Things only get done when we work together, not when we solely work individually. I hope to visit you one day, Tanya. You can come down as well. We can fight over who has better dishes, the norteños or the southerners.
I know, right? But you're totally going to get your
versus
sopapillas with the meal.
Yeah, the Chimayo versus Hatch chili, right?
Woo! Listen,
Well,
do we have any Coloradoans in the house?
oh, man.
Oh no, don't go there. Don't go there.
No, but for green, it's la mitad. It's la mitad, not Hatch. I just have to say it right there.
Well, I would love to show everybody what it feels like to be in this town.
So, oh, sorry. In a year, we are going to have a Satyagraha Institute just out in the Mimbres, which is just not very far from you, Ariana, and not that far from Santa Fe, and not far from me. And the rest of you on this call, Ariana's gonna be one of our presenters next year, and it's you can see the facility where she's been working that she's been telling you about, as well as other really great things here. So we might get some visitors, from the people on this call right now.
No problem.
Yeah.
Please come out, spend a couple extra days, and I'll show you one of the reasons why New Mexico is so special and why people want to be here. Because if you have forgotten why your ancestors chose this place, please let me remind you. I can.
Thank you so much, Ariana. Are there any last questions before we close this session? Who else has a thought to add or a question?
If no one else does, yeah,
What?
I will take just maybe a couple more minutes and show you. This is a book that we put out, and inside of it has artwork that the children left behind, and the stories.
Get that book.
Yeah.
How can they get that? Can you send us information or maybe put
Yeah,
in the
sure.
chat something on how to get that book and how
Sure.
to make a donation to one of your supporting
Sure.
organizations, etc.
Yeah, this is probably my favorite photo that was left. It was so beautiful. And one of the things that what happens when you allow children and adults, by the way, to freely draw is it becomes contagious. And when the parents were unable to sit or to think or to sleep, what we would do is we would just gather all the children together, and then they would all start to paint beautiful things. And then the parents would see how much fun the children were having, and then the parents would come over. And then we didn't have enough paint brushes, and so people were using whatever they could, fingers, hair, paint was everywhere. It was glorious. It was amazing. And it was something that was, I mean, it was beautiful. But again, it's all about giving no restrictions to somebody and allowing them to write their story. And in turn, you have changed their life. So thank you. Again, I'm available. My email is listed. Please send me a message. Please visit. I'm sure that you can come and visit me and then pop up to see Laura. I'll even take you down to the border, leave you there. Just kidding, I won't leave you there. But we'll sit there and, you know, experience. Because there's something different about seeing it and feeling it and doing it. We live in a town, by the way, of 500 Border Patrol agents. We're at 25,000 in our county and 500 Border Patrol. They are our neighbors. They are my neighbors. So it's different. My husband, we joke because a Border Patrol job just was listed within the last couple of weeks. And we looked at the qualifications, and we joked that I was probably one of the most highly qualified because I still have my rating. And I said, well, I'm fairly positive all they have to do is a search on me now. Realize that I'm no longer allowed in their club. Rightfully so, and I'm very proud of it. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Ariana. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for
Thank
being
you.
here. We'll get this up online, and we'll send out the link. So thank you, everyone, and see you tomorrow morning for Inner Life.